This couple simply shared a kiss, and somehow their lips became stuck together. But that was only the beginning. What followed was even more terrifying. If they were separated by more than 30 feet, the man's body would violently lunge toward his wife without warning. And it wasn't just the husband who lost control. The wife experienced the same thing. Tim and Millie had been married for just 1 year. With both of them constantly busy at work, their relationship had slowly begun to suffer. Hoping to repair their marriage, they decided to quit their jobs. They moved back to a small town, determined to start over and reconnect. After returning, they went for a walk in the nearby woods. Unfortunately, it started pouring rain halfway through. Even worse, they accidentally fell into a mysterious cave. Thankfully, the drop was not very deep, and neither of them was hurt. Looking at the heavy rain outside, Tim decided they should wait until it stopped before climbing out. He began examining the cave. Feeling thirsty, Tim noticed a puddle of water at the bottom. Ignoring Millie's attempts to stop him, he scooped it up and drank a large mouthful. He even encouraged Millie to drink some as well. What they did not realize was that this single act would completely change their fate. The next day, the rain had stopped. They got up and prepared to leave. Suddenly, they discovered that their legs were stuck together. Even a gentle pull caused sharp pain. It took a great deal of effort to finally separate. They assumed it was some kind of mold inside the cave and did not think much of it. After climbing out, they returned home, but once they were back, strange things began happening. Millie drove out of the house while Tim was showering. He suddenly lost awareness. His body felt as if it were being pulled by a magnet. He violently slammed toward the direction Millie had driven. Tim suddenly snapped back to his senses. He was completely confused by what had just happened. He had no idea why he had acted that way. Unable to make sense of it, he worried he might be sick. He rushed to the hospital. The doctor told him he was perfectly healthy and just needed some rest. The doctor also mentioned that Tim was lucky. Not long ago, a couple had gone missing near the cave and had still not been found. Tim began to suspect the cave had something to do with it. When he returned home, he searched online. Sure enough, he found reports about the missing couple near that same cave. Just then, Millie walked over. When she learned about the disappearance, she was visibly shaken. A knock suddenly came at the door. When they opened it, a man introduced himself as their neighbor from next door. He said he just wanted to stop by and say hello. Tim and Millie invited Jamie inside. When Jamie heard that they had fallen into the cave, his expression turned strangely cautious. He told them the place used to be a church that had collapsed for unknown reasons. He also mentioned that a group of people had once died there under mysterious circumstances. After chatting a bit longer, they walked Jamie out. Later, Tim leaned in and kissed Millie, but the moment their lips touched, they became stuck together. Millie was furious. Assuming Tim had bitten her on purpose, Tim insisted he had no idea what had happened. He wanted to explain, but he did not even know how. Then, in the middle of the night, something strange happened again. Millie woke up to an odd noise. She instinctively called out to Tim, but he did not respond. So Millie turned on the light. To her horror, she saw Tim chewing and swallowing his own hair. The next day, Tim had to leave for a tour. He had previously been a guitar player and had already made plans with his bandmates. Millie wanted to talk about what had happened the night before, but Tim resisted and refused to discuss it. He felt embarrassed and thought the whole situation sounded ridiculous. Seeing his reaction, Millie had no choice but to drop it. She drove him to the venue. After dropping him off, she drove away. As Millie got farther and farther, Tim suddenly felt overwhelming anxiety rising inside him. He could not calm down. He quickly took some anti-anxiety medication, but the intense unease and dizziness would not go away. Meanwhile, Millie arrived at the local elementary school. She hoped to find a job there. Suddenly, she saw Tim appear at the school in a disturbingly strange state. He looked pale and unwell. Millie rushed outside and pulled Tim into the restroom. She demanded to know what was going on, but Tim himself had no explanation. As they struggled with each other, something bizarre happened. Their bodies became stuck together as if glued by an invisible force. They strained with all their strength. Enduring unbearable pain, they finally managed to pull apart. Millie quickly exited the restroom first. To her shock, she ran into their neighbor Jamie. It turned out he was a teacher at the school. Mortified, Millie hurried away. After leaving the school, Millie angrily scolded Tim. Tim wanted to defend himself, but he did not know where to begin. All he knew was that he felt an uncontrollable urge to be near her. Millie was furious and told him to stay away. After that, she went to Jamie's house. She wanted to explain that what had happened earlier was just a misunderstanding. Jamie seemed to understand why she had come. When Millie noticed the ring on his hand, she realized he was married as well, for reasons unknown. However, he was now living alone. Meanwhile, Tim returned home and began researching frantically. Finally, he found a possible clue. His strange condition seemed to be connected to the day they fell into the cave. Just then, a loud crash came from the front door. To his shock, Millie was stuck against it. When Tim moved, Millie moved with him. Millie insisted that maybe it was just sleepwalking. Tim desperately tried to explain that something was physically wrong with them, but Millie refused to believe him. Helpless, Tim asked her to raise her hand so they could test whether they would stick together again. Millie refused. Fear had already made her reject the truth, so they decided to sleep in separate rooms that night and go to the hospital the next day to get checked. They each went into their own rooms and tried to rest, but in the middle of the night, something terrifying happened. Tim's body began moving uncontrollably toward Millie's room. His arms and legs felt as if they had developed minds of their own, completely beyond his control. Tim was horrified. He pressed himself against the wall to stop from moving forward. But at that exact moment, Millie's bedroom door slowly opened. She stepped out, approaching him in an unnatural and disturbing posture. In the end, their hands fused together. Both of them were terrified. Fortunately, Tim remembered the medication. It was a muscle relaxant. It could reduce muscle activity and loosen muscle tension. Millie desperately pulled the pills out of the drawer. They swallowed them frantically, but the fusion continued, with no sign of slowing down. In desperation, they crushed the remaining pills and inhaled the powder. It was the only way to speed up the effect. Gradually, the rate of fusion began to slow. They pulled in opposite directions.
You're strong, you can do it.
Their arms slowly began to separate. Exhausted, they both collapsed into sleep. By the next morning, Millie had tied Tim up, not because she was afraid they would fuse again, but because they had never fully separated in the first place. Still, Millie came up with a drastic solution. They would cut themselves apart. She picked up a power saw.
Okay, I'm doing it. Hey, just go. No.
In the end, they were completely separated, but there were only 2 muscle relaxant pills left. Once the medication wore off, an even more terrifying full-body fusion would begin. They had to uncover the truth about the cave water before the effects disappeared, but Millie believed she was simply ill. She refused to accept that the cave water was responsible and insisted on going to the hospital. No matter how hard Tim tried, He could not stop her. With no other choice, Tim decided to return to the cave alone. He grabbed some rope and hurried out. Meanwhile, Millie realized her keys were missing. She remembered she had left them at their neighbor Jamie's house the day before, so she went to Jamie's house to retrieve them. When she arrived, it seemed like Jamie was not home, but suddenly, she heard a strange sound coming from inside. When she walked toward the source, she saw a video playing on the television. On the screen was Jamie, standing beside another man. It looked like they were holding a wedding ceremony in a classroom, but then things began to feel wrong. They drank water from an underground pool. Then they cut their own arms. Soon after, their bodies began to merge in a disturbing way. Suddenly, the television turned off. Jamie stepped out from the shadows. He looked strangely pleased. He told Millie that merging with the one you love was a joyful and beautiful thing. Then Jamie used his ring to cut Millie's arm. He wanted to speed up the fusion between her and Tim. Millie was completely terrified. She slapped Jamie across the face and ran out of the house. Meanwhile, Tim finally reached the cave. There, he discovered the truth. It had never been a true church. It was the gathering place of a dangerous cult. They believed that physical fusion would bring eternal happiness. It was a deeply twisted obsession. At that moment, Tim suddenly tripped over something. It was a deformed creature. Only then did Tim realize it was the couple who had previously gone missing, now transformed into something horrifying. Terrified, Tim ran out of the cave and rushed back home. At the same time, Millie returned. She tried to explain what had happened.
You went there.
Tim told her he already knew everything and that he had found a solution. They slowly walked toward each other. Tim quietly moved his hand behind his back. After confessing his love, he decided to sacrifice himself so Millie could live. But at the very moment he was about to act, he saw blood spreading across his chest. It was Millie's blood. She had lost too much and collapsed. As he watched her slowly losing consciousness, Tim let out a cry of despair. He carried her into the living room and laid her gently on the couch. Millie was not dead. Tim chose to merge with her willingly. It was the only way to save her life. In that moment, Millie smiled, a smile filled with relief and gratitude. Tim then took out a disc and played Millie's favorite music. As the soft melody filled the room, their bodies gradually merged into one. Perhaps this was what true love meant. By the time a new neighbor knocked on the door, Tim and Millie had already become someone new. This film is surprisingly powerful. At the beginning, their relationship was on the verge of falling apart. But in the end, because of a strange condition, they were willing to give their lives for each other. It is hard to deny that love can be incredibly powerful.